Welcome back to the Village Bonfire for another episode of the Wild Sacred Journey podcast. A podcast not just for your mind, but for your body and spirit too. Here we don't just talk theory. Instead, we compassionately engage with our lived experiences and a wide variety of topics together, all to invite the question, in these times we find ourselves in, how do we be more human? Thank you for being here. May these conversations awaken, inspire, repair, and evolve something deep within each of us and serve the wild, tender aliveness of our personal and collective hearts. Hiya. So welcome back to a solo episode of the Wild Sacred Journey podcast. So we've had a little bit of a break for a moon cycle and then a few days behind this most recent new moon. But yeah, it's been interesting sort of being on this trip and not really being in spaces that have been quiet enough to record. And yeah, just kind of giving myself permission to like be there, and then noticing that then there's been this like nervousness of like, oh gosh, getting back on the horse. So anyway, so before we kind of get into all of that, yeah, we're gonna light our village fire and just take a few deep breaths in and out. Just notice, perhaps as you feel into the idea of coming together around the fire, like what, if anything, comes up in your body with that? Where do you feel your own inner flame the most? For me right now, I'm really feeling it in my heart and maybe kind of down in my low abdomen. I'm aware too, as I'm sitting here, I'm in a little camper van, or not a camper van, just a camper. It's an Airbnb and it's very cute, but it's a little chilly. So I'm noticing too that I'm feeling just really grateful for fire and for warmth and for what a gift it is to be able to gather. So thank you for joining me. So yeah, so basically this will probably be a little bit of a shorter episode, but I just yeah, like I said, kind of wanted to like back on the horse a little bit and just kind of give you guys an update. I've not been very good about sharing things on social media. And the last episode I think I put out was sort of one recorded a couple days after I'd arrived in Scotland for this 4-month trip. And, you know, I really had so much trouble like with the idea of going back and listening to that. I noticed I was just like so sure it was going to be like so cringy to like hear my thoughts on what this trip was going to be. And it wasn't as bad, but I'm noticing I like, yeah, that there's something about, oh man, I think just the idea of like certainty or like, I think we can come into things just so, or at least I can anyway. It's almost like, yeah, that idea that we could even think we could know how something's going to be before. And like I knew at the time that of course I wasn't going to know, but um it still kind of sneaks up on you, that like that control. And I think that's been such a huge theme for me this trip. It's really interesting because as I think I mentioned in the last episode, I've been feeling the lands of Scotland and Ireland kind of calling to me. They were coming to me in dreams. And when I'd see pictures, it felt like kind of this tug in my gut. And so I've been connecting in with the lands through energy, through resonance, through connecting with plants that are native, through songs and stories and language and things that are interwoven with the land and my ancestors from these lands. And so, yeah, so I like showed up, and how often do we do this too, right? We like show up just like, so like, I'm here. Right? And so I showed up in Scotland and I was like, okay, I'm here. And I just felt this like no from the land. And I was like kind of taken aback by it. And I was sort of like, well, but you called me, like you invited me. I'm here for you, you know. And it just was like, and as I was kind of feeling into that, I was really just feeling this dissonance between the energy that I was um coming in with and the energy of the land. And so even though I'd been connecting with it for a while, when I actually showed up there, I could really feel this gap. And so I was feeling into like what's in that gap, what's in that gap, what's in that gap. And some of it's some cultural stuff, um, and sort of social conditioning. A lot of it, though, was just this theme of like control and trying too hard. And I was just, the first couple of weeks I was in Scotland were really challenging because I just felt like everywhere I turned, I was getting this mirroring of like all the ways in which I was trying so hard and all the ways that that was keeping me from actually like connecting, you know? And we do that in so many areas of our lives. I mean, I know I'm not the only one. um, and it's like the thing that we want the most, we struggle so hard to get because we're so busy trying to get it, you know? And so I just like let this prayer, this mantra, whatever we want to call it, right? Of like this intention of just like, okay, I'm just stop trying, stop trying, stop trying, stop trying. And and I would say that yeah, that this trip, so in addition to sort of being a shift in some of this trying too hard and some of this control, right, what's kind of been coming out of that is then, and I really wasn't expecting this, but so far it's like it feels like parts of me have come back alive, and there's just this like inner vitality that I don't think I felt in years. And some of that too, it's funny, I joke that like I'm pretty sure Scotland's unofficial motto is like switchbacks. We don't need switchbacks, because if you go to Scotland and you do any hiking, you'll notice that most hikes are just like, hey, look, a mountain. And then they just go straight up the mountain and then like straight down the mountain. And like, why do switchbacks when we can just hack rough stair-ish type things into the side of this stony mountain and then just climb? And I would laugh with other people who were hiking too about how it's both one of the most like um oh gosh, what's the word, not overwhelming but intimidating, one of the most intimidating and empowering things at the same time. It's this like funny paradox of like, because you're just looking straight up and you're like, I'm going there, like what? And then you like climb for like 2 minutes and you're like, oh my God, my breath, I have to pause and like catch my breath. And you look back and you're like, I've come so far. And so, you know, there is something about this like directness that was really challenging, but also like really playful. And so that was something I was playing with as I was hiking a lot, was like finding the play in the challenge. And through that, somehow it feels like, yeah, there's this rawness, this aliveness, this vitality that I've sort of started finding in my body and in my system and in my heart and in my soul a little bit more. So that's been really beautiful thing that never saw coming from this trip. And and then along with that, I feel like I had all these moments where I was thinking back to, so my first big solo trip was 3 months in New Zealand when I was 18, 19. I turned 19 over there. And it was such an amazing, amazing time for me because I feel like I really um, got to kind of find who I was. And as someone who's a fairly porous person, I think I'd spent a lot of my life not really knowing where I ended and others began. And so there was something about going on this trip by myself and being like, oh my gosh, I don't have to, like, what do I want to do? And like, what are the things I like to do? And that was really liberating for me in really profound and beautiful ways. And so I think like really having my own back um, in many ways that gap year trip, that New Zealand trip was like a big one for me. And so that trip has really flashed to mind a lot on this trip because I think there's something about, yeah, this like part of me that's coming back alive again. Um, as well, there's a lot of, it's different, but there's some similarities in the Scottish landscape and in the New Zealand landscape that I think I was picking up on. Um, but there was something too about, I was noticing that, yes, some of that was like, during COVID, I think I'd really gotten into like, well, I didn't have anything to do but work. And so I was doing a lot of like working because I didn't know what else to do, or because there were other parts of my life that were feeling less fulfilled and fulfilling. And so I was just like filling the gaps with work. And so there's been this part of this trip that's been like a little bit of that like reclaiming of like, okay, who am I when I'm not working? Can I get reacquainted with boredom and like actually make friends with that? Can I shift my priorities around? It's been really lovely just kind of working some in the evenings and then having my day to just be mine and to do what I want to do. That's been really amazing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, is this what life could be like? Could we all actually create a world where, yes, we worked and we contributed meaningfully to the world, but where like, you know, our our lives get the best of us, and sort of the making money part of things gets like the rest of us, um that our relationships are really where we, and our moment to moment interactions are where we're putting our energy. So that's been something I've been exploring and playing with, and I'm like, that feels really nice in my system. um and so that feels like, yes, is that idealistic? Of course. But it's also like, I feel like we have to play with those things in our bodies and in our lives and in our nervous systems and kind of start to be like, okay, this is sort of working, or like, okay, this feels really nice. How could I bring more of this in? And that's how we start to build a different world, I think, I hope. Um, so yeah, so that's been like a part of this trip. And so that has had echoes back to my first trip. But then there's also been, I've been noticing how, it just feels so clear to me somehow that that trip was really about discovering who I am, and that this trip has somehow been also about relationship and who am I in relationship to each other. And so I've also been exploring, like, there's been a lot around the themes of like our collective responsibility. And I've been noticing sort of, yeah, and I think some of this is like an eldering kind of process for me of like, where I see reflected in some of the people around me, this sort of fixation on like, I need to state my needs and wants. I need to like get better at standing up for myself. I need to like prioritize me. And it's like, yes, of course. And like, what do we owe to the space between us? What do we owe um, to our collective responsibility, and to, yeah, but to the space between, and you might have heard me mention in other podcasts, I work a lot with like spider medicine. And so I've been sort of really feeling into what it is like to be in this web of interconnectivity. And then through that, it's like, yeah, so these threads that are between us also like need our tending and prioritization and care, right? And you'll hear people say sometimes that like in a relationship between two people, for example, just to sort of simplify it down, there's like person A's wants and needs, person B's wants and needs, and then there's like C is the relationship, right? And the relationship has its own wants and needs. And so I feel like that's something that's been coming up for me, and that feels like yeah, like an eldering process. um so yeah, so I mean, I feel like those have been some big themes. Another big one that's been coming up, um that's really like kind of kicking my butt, is like unlearning comfort as like what I'm aiming for. And so some of this I think is me personally based on some interpretations of my astrology chart that I've heard. There's that piece of things, but then it's also something that I think is like something we in general could kind of look at, like ease, yes, like we should be aiming for ease where we can. We should be aiming for joy where we can. We should be aiming for lightness where we can, because, you know, those things, we find those in places where alignment is happening. But comfort, comfort is like what I go for when I'm ready to collapse, actually. And comfort, when I lean into places where there's comfort, I'm usually leaning into places where I'm giving my power away, or where I start to play small, or I give myself an out. And so I've been really like just kind of gently encouraging myself this trip, like, okay, like noticing in those moments when I'm tired and when I'm just like feeling really like I've been hopping from place to place and struggling to find places to stay, and, trying to figure out how the money is going to work. And like when I get caught up in kind of some of those hows of things, and some of that's like, again, like scarcity stuff that takes me more into fear and takes me more into control and lack of trust. But it's also like just actual material, physical needs that need tending. But so as I like find myself in those places, that's when I want to turn to comfort, right? Like, oh my God, I wish this were easier. I wish someone else would just like come forward and give me this. I wish something like this, right? And suddenly I'm like looking at comfort and entitlement and all of these kinds of things. But underneath, there's actually this tone of collapse and power, um, abjugation. I think that's the word I'm looking for. Recording this a little later at night, so you're getting slightly like goofy Kate, but brain brain weird Kate. Um, but yeah, and so it's been interesting too to explore like where can I actually wean myself off of this need for comfort and into this place of like, yes, trusting in the benevolence of things, trusting inherently like what will work out. I've been working a lot with sort of the just like the repeated sort of prayer, chants, intention, whatever we want to call it, of like this or something better. And then trusting that if this, being whatever it is I'm aiming for, isn't working out, that it's because I'm being redirected to something better. And it's funny, I've offered a couple clients that recently, and that's like really resonated for them. So I offer that to you too, anybody listening, if that's resonating for you at this time in your life, right? Like, because we have to be in action. We have to be moving towards something. We have to have something we're kind of pointing ourselves in the direction of. But then can we like that whole like release control of the outcome and trust that actually something better might come along that we, you know, couldn't have even imagined. And I think like that's such an important skill that we're going to need in this like world building, this world building space, right? Of like, as we're sort of navigating, yeah, just so much grief and so much just heartbreak and hurt in the world, right? And all the ways that we've like the reckoning for all the ways that we've been doing things. And then we're seeing the results, the fruits of those actions. And many of them are not great and not, um, particularly aligned with with human bodies, with our humanity. And so, I think this question of like, how do we start to build a new world? And some of that is I think we have to build skills for building things we've never seen done before, and so we have to be building skills to be in this imaginal space where, you know, yeah, we just keep rooting into something that's alive, that's vital, that's present, that's human and humane, into these deeper, older values that have roots, like something that has roots. And then from that, opening ourselves to like, okay, as long as we stay oriented by this, like we don't have to know exactly how it's going to turn out. We just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other and trying to do something different. Um, and then trusting in that this or something better, right? Like trusting that we'll be met with something beautiful. And I feel like, I've there's so much value to shadow work. And I feel like for me personally, I've really swung that direction. Like this trip has also been showing me how much I've really swung that direction. I think in part in response to a lot of sort of spiritual bypassing, like overemphasis on the light work, right? That's happening in the world that's really kind of toxic and not helpful. And so I've been, yeah, swinging in that direction of like feeling like I'm there, like advocating for the shadow and the grief and the darkness and the this and the that, and like the fruitfulness in that and the beauty in that and the power in that and the, you know, the potential for healing and transformation in that, right? And then I'm like noticing in my own system, like what a cost, like what cost that comes with to to my own joy and my own hope and my own sense of like, yeah, trusting in the benevolence. And so I feel like that's also been a piece that um I don't know, kind of being on this trip and in these like liminal spaces and in this state of constant movement and flow and in connection with the lands here, and the people here, and kind of just being out of my routines and out of my element, like that's sort of given me opportunity to see that and start to really intentionally work with that and shift that. And it's been really beautiful, you know. I mean, you just, those synchronicities start to come up of like the meeting the right people at the right times and the um yeah, and just being somewhere where you're like, oh, this is I think why I was called here today, or like, oh, just even if it doesn't matter, but like I'm just able to be present for this silly conversation with this person that I'll probably never meet again, but it was like actually really beautiful for both of us and like probably really needed. And there was something really human and humane in that, that really like rooted both of us into this moment in time and kind of tethered us to this world, you know, in a way that felt really nourishing and fulfilling. Um, so yeah. So then let's see, a couple weeks ago, gosh, probably actually about 3 weeks ago now, I shifted from Scotland to Ireland, and it's just been right around the eclipse portal opening. And it's just been such a whirlwind of like lessons in like not using my social nervous system as a weapon against myself, like noticing all the ways in which I'm imagining how other people are perceiving me and using that to like make myself smaller or to somehow define or hurt myself, keep myself down. And like, shit, y'all, I do that a lot. And so that's been really coming up, and I've been really seeing that and working with that. Um, and then also like how that affects how I relate to other people, right? And oh, so yeah, so there's been massive amounts of grief. There's been a huge amount of like my own social nervous system, noticing my own sense of like lovability and like my own right to belong and to like take up space. And you know, and all of that does feel ancestrally connected as well. Um and yeah, and like looking to and within myself and within my relationships and my environment of like, where am I actually receiving nourishment and what are these balances? And it just feels like there's just so much more nuanced layers, so many more nuanced layers of that that are visible for me. Again, maybe some of that's just getting a little older, getting a little bit more experienced. Um, but I think a lot of that's being out of my regular routines and out of my regular spaces, which, you know, is a huge part of what travel can really do for us. Um, yeah. And so, you know, it's funny. It's like, I think in some ways, I like really imagined these lands would be, you know, I think we always imagine there's going to be some like really distinct before and after. And I think there is in some ways. And yet, you know, it also, I think a lot of times that stuff doesn't come clear until later. Um, yeah, but I don't know. But there's been something too about finding lightness and humor. There's so much humor in Scotland and in Ireland, along with grief and this culture of hospitality, the Ceilidh culture, like the coming together around song or dance or story, um, which makes sense then with some of this sort of relating, um, the sort of the sense that the earth, that the land is really sacred and also and kind of magical and also like holds those community links and holds those stories and holds those songs. Yeah, all of that is somehow, it's there, and yet like the lessons that I feel like I'm receiving on that aren't like clearly that. They're sort of maybe tangentially that or obliquely that, and are kind of like showing up in these other ways for me. um but yeah, so I think I'll leave it there for now. But that's a little update. So yeah, so I'm about 5 weeks. It's like I'm at the point now where I'm no longer counting up how long I've been here, but I'm counting down to like when I leave, and already I'm feeling the grief of um yeah, leaving, and that I don't feel ready to leave. um but yeah, so yeah, so I think I'll leave it there for now. So let's just kind of, I don't know, just take a couple deep breaths in and out together, wherever you are connecting with me around this fire, wherever you're listening in to me ramble about my trip and some of the lessons that I've been exploring and playing with. And let's just like drop any agenda and drop any need to be doing or being anything other than just breath, presence. And drop the trying perhaps for a moment to just be heartbeat, blood pumping, cells moving, lungs filling and emptying, maybe eyes seeing, maybe ears hearing, maybe skin sensing, maybe tongue tasting. And nothing to say or do, just a moment to be alive and to just be with the beauty and the grief and the joy and silliness, absurd, the absolute absurdity of it. Absurdity and gravitas all at the same time. And so thank you for joining me for this moment around the fire, for this moment of just being. And thanks for coming along with me. And if any of this resonated, I'd love to hear. You know, yeah, feel free to just share any stories of trips you've been on or any lessons you've been working with. You can find me on Instagram, wild sacred journey _KP for Kate Powell. You can email me, Kate at wildsacredjourney.com. Yeah, or I think on Spotify, at least there's like a way, if you listen to this on Spotify, there's a way to, I think, write in or answer a poll or something like that. So anyway, I'd love to hear. So until next time, I'm hoping that I'll be able to be in some quieter spaces, and start recording, get some guests back on here. I just have so many amazing people I can't wait to speak to and have on and just have amazing conversations to share with you all. It's just a matter of scheduling, timing, and yeah, quiet recording spaces. So yeah, but in the meantime, um, hope to see you next time around the fire. And thanks for thanks for being on this journey with me. Hi, Kate here again. Thank you for gathering with us. Whether you've been here a while or found your way here thanks to today's guest, it means so much to me and the world I dream of to have you here. I hope you'll tune in for more of our conversations. We humans seem to be at a profound threshold and facing questions of deep impact for the future and the world. We need our full hearts and humanity as we sow seeds of change in these times of joy and heartbreak. I count myself lucky to be here now, around this virtual village fire, weaving our stories into a medicine with humans like you. As a community medicine space, this podcast is relational. It weaves webs of connection and mutual respect and care across time and space. If you appreciate and support the future we're seeding here, you can support the weaving of this web in a few ways. 1. Share episodes with friends and family or online with your community. It also helps the podcast immensely if you like, rate, subscribe to, or follow the podcast where you watch or listen, so you get notified when new episodes drop and new listeners find us as they search. 2. Join us on Patreon. Doing so supports conversations like the one you just heard and allows you access to live community gatherings and medicine circles and more as we continue to grow. It also helps me keep the space advertisement free so the conversations stay intact as they are. If you have questions, suggestions, connections, or would like to find out more about working with me, you can find me online at www.wildsacredjourney.com, on Instagram at wildsacredjourney_KP, or email me, kate@wildsacredjourney.com. Until next time, from my heart to yours, I release today's fire with a prayer for our individual and collective wholeness, connection, and joy. May it be so.